Hi there. Sorry I was taking care of some serious business. Speaking of serious business, please enjoy this clip from Mornings with Mike Winters, which, by the way, you can watch the show in its entirety at roswellstalkfm.com. Joining us in studio this morning from Builders Do It Center is Justin Ellis. Good morning.
Morning, Mike. How we doing today?
Doing pretty good. Trying to stay dry like everybody else, I guess.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah. Well, I imagine there's a few folks, because last night's storm, that was a doozy.
That was something else. I was in Artesia at our Artesia store for some safety training with one of our guys, and he and I were driving back to Roswell and got to drive right through the heart of that little doozy. That was a little closer to lightning than I normally care to be.
I would imagine one or two folks discovering they probably have some home projects they need to take care of after that.
Yes, there was some hail reports in various areas. Roswell didn't get much, but it looks like south of Artesia got some hail, and Alamogordo got hammered pretty good. My in-laws got some pretty good hail.
It sounded like...
Yep.
I heard...
Yeah.
This morning I heard someone who lived over in the Enchanted Hills area saw some hail.
We got hail at my house, but it was pea-sized, and it lasted about 38 seconds.
I didn't see it, but it felt like, or heard it. It sounded like it was, and of course I don't know if it was just the wind blowing the rain up against it, but it sounded kind of like hail going on out there.
Yeah, that's how I figured it out. I heard it and went running. So
yeah. Well, speaking of home projects, topic we're kind of doing today is it's not necessarily a specific project per se, but kind of a lot of folks they do home projects. Some are doing it with the intention of they're going to sell this house eventually. How do I either update it so when I do sell the house, I get what I'm paying for here, or some, some just, certain areas of the house are better areas to work on when it comes in terms of creating value to your home.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people would be surprised because then some people will think they'll do a project, we'll say something landscaping or something like that, and they'll think, oh, well, that's going to add this big value to my home, and you're like, not really. I mean, unless you're adding like a pool or something. But if it's like if you're just like rocking the yard or you're doing something like that where you shell out $3-4 grand to do it, you may not exactly get that back on when it comes to resale time.
Absolutely. And when it comes to in thinking about investing in your home, and ultimately every home improvement project is an investment. It's an investment of time and it's an investment of money. And the decent thing to do is to think about that investment in the long term and take into account all of the factors that go into making a decision about what project's right for you and what your budget is for that project. And, we kind of always talk to folks who are thinking about a home improvement project and split them out into a couple different categories. Number one, is it a small project or a big project? A big project would be anything over, $1,200-$1,500 in initial value.
Right.
And then anything under that I would consider a small project. And then the other big one is whether it's an improvement that's in a home they're going to sell soon, or if it's just they're making an improvement in the home, but they want to be aware of the ROI over the next 10 or 20 years.
Sure.
And you have to take different things into account when making those decisions. If you're going to sell the home soon, in many cases, the big projects don't pay for themselves. You have to have some time to get the value out of a larger project.
Okay.
Especially in a lot of big projects now, where sometimes you have to think about doing those big projects is to get the home into condition that it's going to be able to sell in a reasonable manner.
Gotcha.
And in a short enough period of time. This would be things that really affect the appearance of the home, like landscaping is actually a pretty good example.
Yeah.
I don't know, and actually, unfortunately, I don't have data on the landscaping side. I've got some data on other projects.
Right. But it creates curb appeal.
Absolutely, and so that's one of the big things you want to look at. If you're trying to sell the home, you really want to look at things that do two things. One is what gives you the most value in terms of increased sale price, and two is what's going to help keep that home on the market the shortest amount of time by making it very appealing to potential buyers.
Sure.
And in many cases, those are the smaller projects. And really, we always encourage folks that if that's your goal is to get the home sold, number one, talk to your realtor. Realtors understand the market far better than we do, and definitely better than the average homeowner. But look at things like paint.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Paint's a big one. And it's a relatively small investment, and it's a maintenance item. And I would sincerely consider doing an update on your paint, especially if the exterior paint looks to be in a little rough condition. It can be very off-putting to a homeowner, to a potential buyer if they walk up and the paint's chipping it. It raises a lot of questions about what condition the home's in.
Sure.
The other ones to really think about are things like updating hardware, light fixtures, and plumbing fixtures, and bath hardware, cabinet door hardware, interior door hardware. Those projects are relatively inexpensive. They're something that most people can do themselves, especially the hardware replacement. But even plumbing and electrical fixtures, if you're a reasonably skilled do-it-yourselfer, you're more than capable of doing those projects.
Sure.
Those really yield a lot of value because you can put a relatively small amount of money into the home and get a lot of bang for your buck by making it more appealing to today's buyer. You know, if you have brass fixtures in your home, going to an oil rub bronze or a satin nickel that's a little more trendy right now is going to make the home appear to be a little more on trend.
Sure.
And that's pretty important in terms of making a lot of buyers find that home appealing and not feeling like the home is dated and needs a lot of work.
Sure. I got a question for you, and actually I'm dealing with one personally here because as I've mentioned many times here, I am trying to sell a home. The carpet in my home needs to be replaced. However, what I've done, I haven't replaced the carpet. I'm offering a cash allowance for it. And my logic here, and you can tell me if I'm doing this is a good idea. My logic is whoever moves in may not want carpet. Maybe they want to put hardwood flooring down. Maybe they want to put tile. So I'm just saying, you know what, rather than me picking what you got, here's, you rip this carpet. Because I know the carpet, it's old carpet. It's just, and that's the one thing I've done a bunch of upgrades to this house, and that's the one we haven't gotten to yet. And but I'm like, well, it'd be stupid for me to put carpet down and someone else is just going to turn around and rip it up and put a flooring down or something like that. I mean, is that a viable move? That's a really good idea, or is that...
I think it depends on what your realtor is advising you to do in your particular situation. Yeah. But my gut says it kind of depends on two things. One is what condition the existing carpet is in.
Right.
If the existing carpet is worn out and when you walk in, the first thing you think is, oh man, this carpet's kind of grungy.
Right.
I would seriously think about doing something with the floor now just because it's probably impacting that initial impression when people walk in the home.
Gotcha.
If the flooring's in okay condition, it's just a little older and it maybe needs to be replaced anyways, I think it could go either way.
Right.
I would actually think very seriously about taking the dollars that you were going to put in a cash allowance and investing those in a new floor now and doing a hard surface floor.
Okay.
The trend is very much away from carpet. Carpet used to be a huge part of the flooring business. It's still a big part, but it's not nearly as large as it was, at least in our area. Mm-hmm. I would say that hard surfaces account for better than 90% of our entire flooring business.
Gotcha.
And that's because the consumer has gotten to the point where they very much perceive hard surface floors as being easier to take care of, which is probably the single largest factor in most people's selection of a flooring product now, is how easy is this to take care of. Mm-hmm. The other big factor is that it just seems like it's cleaner. And so people's impressions, they walk in and, okay, this house is real clean.
Sure. A little more pet-friendly, things like that.
And pet-friendly is a huge part of it. So many more families have pets now than might have a few years ago and have more indoor pets. And so that ability to keep that clean is a big factor. It can go either way. I would not replace it with carpet if you're going to go ahead and replace it. If I was going to do the work now, I would go to a hard surface floor.
Gotcha.
Just because it tends to be a little more on trend. And I think it's saying new carpet in a listing sounds like somebody's picked a carpet color you may or may not like. If you say new laminate, new hardwood floor, new tile, it sounds like an improvement.
Gotcha.
Carpet just gets treated like a piece of furniture, essentially.
Sure. So, in essence, if you do go that route, obviously, if again, you're looking on return for investment here, you obviously don't want to pick the cheapest, most thing out there, but at the same time, you're not going to go and, if you go hardwood and pick these high-end hardwoods, because you're not going to get your money back if you do that.
No, and in all honesty, the things you get in a higher-end flooring product in particular, or in any higher-end project, probably is not going to pay for itself because the value is very intrinsic.
Sure.
And it's very unique to the buyer. Mm-hmm. They fell in love with this hardwood because it's beautiful to them. It may not be something that's beautiful to everybody else. So when somebody comes to us and says, hey, I'm doing this flooring project because I'm going to sell my home, or I'm building this home, but I'm only going to stay in a few years, so I want to keep something in it that's reasonably priced, we tend to put them in something that's not basic, but has very broad appeal.
Okay.
Right now we would recommend something like a glue-down vinyl floor that is a wood look. Woods are very hot right now, so we would definitely recommend that. We have a 99-cent a square foot laminate right now in stock that's a beautiful product. It looks like a vintage barnwood, very hot. That's the kind of product we'd recommend, not a $4, $5, $7 a square foot hardwood.
Gotcha.
We'd be more than happy to sell you a $4 or $5 a square foot hardwood, but there's probably not the short-term ROI.
Sure.
If you lived on that floor for 10 or 20 years or 5 years even, it's a different situation because the home's going to appreciate in value, and that will add to that appreciation. And plus, you will get value out of it. And that's one of the big things to look at with any of these projects is not only the ROI in terms of the sale value of the home, but two other factors with the ROI. What's your enjoyment of the home? And a kitchen remodel is a great example. You know, in the Mountain West region, the average ROI on a kitchen remodel is about 65%. So if you put in a $10,000 kitchen remodel, you're going to get about $6,500 in increased sale value.
Okay.
So, which is not bad, in all honesty.
Sure.
At this point in this market, virtually nothing returns over 100%. The closest things to 100% are things like attic insulation, garage door replacement, entry door replacement, because they, A, are very inexpensive, and B, are, with the exception of attic insulation, add curb appeal.
Sure.
And so they shorten the amount of time that houses are on markets.
Gotcha.
And typically, the shorter a period of a time the home is on the market, the better your sale price is going to be.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Just as a
Because
rule
people
of
get a
thumb.
little more desperate and they really drop prices.
Exactly, yeah. So that's one big factor is to think about how you're going to enjoy it. So if you're thinking about putting that $10,000 kitchen remodel in, if you don't cook, it may not make as much sense. Painting those cabinets and putting hardware on them may be the right investment. Sure. If you cook every single day, you're going to get a lot of value out of that over the course of time.
Sure. You know, and you made another point here kind of connecting me. We talked like painting earlier as one of those things that's relatively cheap. But when you do paint, you want to stick to probably neutral tone stuff, not, you know, like, okay, my favorite color is lime green. Great, but most people don't like lime green, so don't paint your kitchen lime green because it may detract if you keep it a tan or a brown or a white or something that's more in the neutral palette. You got a better shot.
Pastels and earth tones are always a good call.
Yeah.
Exterior trim, you can get away with brighter colors because they're normal as long as it's appropriate to the home and appropriate to the neighborhood.
Sure.
But yeah, you want to be careful, especially with interior colors. I had a friend who purchased a home in Las Cruces when we were in college, and the previous owner had been a very big fan of a certain NASCAR driver who was sponsored by a certain competitor of ours who shall go nameless.
So just say there's a lot of orange.
They had a room that was painted a particular shade of orange that was so bright that when you closed the door, the sunlight coming in the window made the light coming under the door bright orange.
Now, if he did that in Artesia, he might actually get his money back.
Absolutely. in Artesia, it actually would be a very good, and it might be a nice color in some applications.
Sure.
In this particular application, it was obnoxious, to be honest with you. And if I had been selling that home, the home had been on the market for an extended period of time. If I had been selling the home, I would have painted that room.
Right.
You know, now, normally I would have said a gallon of paint. In this particular case, it was 2 gallons of primer and a gallon of paint to cover up that orange.
Sure.
I have never had so much trouble. I had to help him paint it, and I have never had so much trouble covering an ugly paint color in my entire. You kept painting it and painting it every time you come back, and you're like, it's still orange. It's had some staying power. Yeah. So in that case, I would have painted that room a white or an off-white and done that work ahead of time and invested a few $100s because my guess is that previous potential purchasers of that home walked in and saw that and went, ooh, never mind.
Right. I don't want to fool with that.
Yeah, and there was a bunch of stuff in this home. This home was definitely not, in my opinion, move-in ready. It did not need a major remodel, but we had to do a fair amount of work on that thing before we could get my friend moved in.
And I think you could probably throw wallpaper in that category because I don't think, like back in, 80s maybe, there was a time where there's some wallpaper that was very popular and quite frankly, ugly, to be honest. I mean, you look at it, there's these stripes, there's these decor. When I see those kind of rooms, I instantly think a dated house.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The home I grew up in, the second house my family lived in after I was born, we moved into when I was probably 6 or 7, and I lived there most of my childhood. When we moved in or bought the home prior to moving into it, it had quilted wallpaper in all of the bathrooms.
Wow.
As in, imagine your grandmother's pink quilt.
Yeah.
Somebody had glued it to the wall. And this was a product that was very popular in the 80s.
Yeah.
And there were a number of other things. Quite frankly, that house was ugly when we bought it. I remember thinking, man, I'm like 7 and I think this house is ugly. So that should tell you something. Any kind of wallpaper I would highly recommend dealing with. Paneling is very similar as well.
Okay. Now, is there modern wallpaper patterns and things that are acceptable at this point, or
We don't do wallpaper, and to be honest with you, we don't get a lot of call for wallpaper.
Gotcha.
The wallpaper industry at this point has pretty much gone into two categories. Folks who had it in the 80s who still think it's the best thing ever. And there are a handful of very high-end wallpaper manufacturers out there. And so you see them in very, very elaborate homes, and especially in certain architectural styles, and they're typically getting picked by an interior designer.
Gotcha.
I don't know that there's a paper hanger in Roswell anymore. I believe there is one or two.
So it's gone the way of the dodo, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be willing to bet they haven't gotten their basswood paper tables out in a good long while.
What about borders? Are they still popular? Like in kitchens?
I think they're less popular than even wallpaper. I could not tell you the last time I sold a border. If you have it in your home, I would highly recommend covering it with crown molding.
Well, I'm glad because I hate those.
I'm glad that people
finally got rid of those. But
yeah.
Okay, so let's do this. Pound for pound. If someone says, I want to do some updates to sell my home, we're not talking for personal enjoyment here, just to increase value on their home. If you wanted to say pinpoint rooms you need to address, which rooms would you steer them towards and which ones would you steer them away from?
I would make sure that the face of your home, whatever the first thing they're going to encounter on the exterior, is in good condition.
Okay.
If it needs paint, even if it's just touched up or the trim painted or the door painted to make sure it looks clean, I would highly recommend that, as well as maybe any concrete repairs, anything like that just makes the home seem ready to move in.
Sure.
And I would really focus on the living areas of the home. Bedrooms, you can tend to get away with a lot of sins because there's a lot of furniture in bedrooms. Mm-hmm. Living rooms, kitchens, baths are a totally different thing. The way people see them when they walk in is pretty much the way they're going to live in them. Living rooms being a little bit of an exception, but kitchens and bathrooms, there's not a lot of furniture. The cabinets stay, the fixtures tend to stay.
Appliances in many cases.
Yeah, appliances in many cases. I would make sure that those are very up to date. I would make sure that the light fixtures coordinate. I would make sure that the hardware looks current, and I would make sure that the paint is not necessarily perfect, but you're looking for unoffensive.
Gotcha.
You want it to be colors that are attractive to a broad audience. You want it to be clean. You want it to be in good condition. And those are the things I would really focus on. And a lot of it's going to depend on what your budget is. If you are working with a realtor, ask your realtor. Ask them, say, hey, let's walk through the houses. We're getting this listing together, and tell me what you think we should do. Mm-hmm. That's the process I would go through. And go with their recommendations and prioritize based on your budget. If you can afford to spend $1,000 right now and they say, okay, you got to deal with your exterior paint, put it in the exterior paint. And that's going to be really important. But don't think about what's important to you and when you're buying a home. You want to look at what the general public would do. You may have something in your home that's absolutely beautiful to you and maybe really neat, but it's only appealing to 20% of potential buyers. Right. You're looking to appeal to the other 80%.
Sure. You're looking for a broader market.
This is a math game, ultimately.
Right.
And the idea is to make your home appealing to as broad a range of potential buyers as possible.
Yeah. So really anything that, so really it's less is more in many cases when it comes to selling a home. Like you said, landscaping the yard a little bit where it's, keeping the bushes trimmed, do a little exterior painting if it needs the interior painting, stuff that...
Make the home look cared for.
Yeah.
And a lot of it also depends on the price point of your home. If you're a lower-end home, move-in ready is very important because the homeowner that's buying a home in the $90,000 to $200,000 range probably doesn't have a lot of extra cash at closing to do those remodeling projects.
Right.
So they need to be able to walk in, drop their furniture, and enjoy the home they're in. If you're selling a home at the higher end, it becomes less important. You're just looking to not be offensive to a potential buyer and to look like the home is well maintained.
Because they're probably going to do something.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they're more likely to have specific tastes for what they want. And so that's a little bit different scenario there.
Okay. What about, maybe this doesn't fall under return on investment so much, but on selling a home. Like if you, not so much the cosmetic stuff, but the functional stuff, your hot water heaters, your air conditioners, your appliances, your, if you have water softening units, things like that. I mean, does that stuff either add value or add sellability to a home where obviously the people want those things working, but I mean, if you're like are these good? Look, like I just replaced this water heater 2 years ago. Is that a selling point or is that just a peace of mind type thing?
I think peace of mind is probably closer. A realtor probably could give us a better answer on that. But my impression is that as long as everything is in good working order and it doesn't appear to be on the verge of having to be replaced, you're probably pretty safe. Water heaters are a good example. A 2-year-old water heater is going to be more likely to keep to make a homeowner want to purchase a home than a 10 or 12-year-old that you're going, okay, I'm
on borrowed
two
time
bad days. Anytime this works, I'm in good shape. And a lot of it depends, yet again, on the price of the home and the kind of home you're selling. There are some homes that are getting sold as is, where is, that are being sold at a price point that makes the buyer able to get those projects done.
What about the higher ticket stuff? Like as a water heater, I mean, you could get away $300-400. Where, say, an air conditioning unit where you're spending $5, $6, $7, $8, $10,000 on that. I mean, is that a selling point? If you say, okay, this is just a year old, this $8,000 air conditioning unit.
That's a good question. It would be to me as a buyer if I'm purchasing a home and I don't have a lot of extra cash probably after closing because you're tying up all your dollars into that new home. The idea of not knowing that you're probably not going to have to put any money into that, I would say is pretty valuable. I would say it's more valuable if there's a warranty that goes with it.
Gotcha.
To me, with those functional things, the biggest thing is making sure that everything's in good working order, and that when you go to close, and hopefully most buyers are going to want a home inspection. And you want to make sure that you pass that home inspection.
Sure.
Because if you don't, you're going to have some issues. If you have some small problems, you can get them dealt with. If you have some major functional mechanical system potential appliance problems, that's going to affect your ability to get to a closing, which can throw some real issues into your world if you're in the process of selling your home and buying a new home, et cetera.
Sure. So, the difference between selling it, losing a buyer, or shelling out a lot more money to sell your home than you anticipated. I know, like, roof is I would bet that's the one, if I had to guess, of all the major issues that probably become wedges in a home getting sold or not, is finding out there's major roof problems.
That one happens all the time, and that is one reason that if you look at the MLS listings that most realtors use, the age of the roof is very, very often listed as a 2-year-old roof, a 12-year-old roof, a 25-year-old roof, because if you have issues with the roof, it can affect your ability to get insurance on the home after it's purchased.
Sure.
Which is ultimately the reason that most people have problems with their roofs. It's not just that the roof has issues, it's that it affects their ability to get the home insured, because insurers only want to cover a home that has a good functioning roof, protecting them from having additional losses inside of the home.
Sure. They don't want to put a new roof on that house a year after you bought it. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and if there's not a claim, they may not want to cover it. I mean, it's one of the things that people don't often misunderstand with insurance companies and roofs is that insurance companies don't cover roofs because they actually care about the roof. They insure the roof because if they don't make sure that the roof is in functional condition, they're going to have water damage claims and other claims inside the interior of the home that are much more expensive to deal with.
So it's easier to fix it at the top versus paying for it all the way down.
Exactly.
Yeah. Of course, if anybody has any questions about stuff, I mean, you can swing by Builders Do It Center, talk to any of the folks there. If you're saying, hey, I'm selling my home, I got some stuff I want to do in the kitchen, and you just tell them out flat right, is this a good idea, or should I hold off, or what should I go with it? Your folks will say, give their opinions on, what changes should be made, if any, and guide you on how to change those things.
Absolutely. And if you do that, and as you're evaluating a potential project, whether that's related to the sale of your home or you're just doing a home improvement project and trying to evaluate your budget, number one, think about how much cash you have to put into the project, or how much ability you have to borrow to do the project. Think about how you're going to use the space that's being improved. Like we talked about with the kitchen earlier, if that's important to you, that's worth something.
Sure.
If you're thinking about a deck addition or replacement and you spend a lot of time outdoors, it's a better investment. And then the other factor is think about how long you're going to be in the home. And what I would really, if you're looking for more information, number one, come talk to us. But the other thing you can do is there's a website called costversusvalue.com that Remodeling Magazine and some of their sponsors have put together, including some of our vendors. And they have actually taken nationwide data and broken it down by region. We're in the mountain region in that study. And then they've even broken it down to some metro areas. So there's no data for Roswell or southeast New Mexico, but there is data for El Paso, Lubbock, and Albuquerque. And you can kind of look at those to get a gauge.
Ballpark,
and that will tell you within certain categories what the average cost of a project is for those things. And that's a good one if you're just going, okay, I got $20,000 and I'm thinking about putting it in my home, where can I put it?
Right.
And two, what the average ROI is. The other thing it'll tell you, which is kind of interesting, is what does that ROI, return on investment, look like for this year compared to last year compared to the year before?
Sure, because
it goes up and down because homeowners value different things. Any project that impacts energy use goes with energy prices. So a couple of years ago when energy prices were incredibly high, projects that yielded energy savings like attic reinsulation and window replacements were of much higher value than they currently are. They're still pretty darn good investments, but they're definitely lower investments now than they were, or lower return on investment now than they were 2 years ago.
Sure. And I imagine, like you said, the money is probably that's probably question number one is, okay, how much money do you actually have to spend to update? So if you've only got a couple grand, $2, $3, $4,000 versus someone that has, say, 20 grand, you're obviously going to be looking at the more simpler things. Let's just update the paint. If you're only got, like, say, $2 grand, $3 grand, let's just maybe do the paint, do the simple things that'll add curb appeal, add when someone walks in and says, hey, this looks nice.
And actually, the ROI tends to be better on smaller projects. You know, if you look at our market, the top 3 ROIs, and these are all north of 65 or 70% in terms of return on investment for home improvement projects in the mountain region, are attic insulation, replacing your front door and frame with a steel door, and replacing your garage door, which is consistently one of the highest is garage door replacement, are all very inexpensive.
Yeah.
The average in the Mountain West region on all those is under $2,000, and that's with labor and materials.
Okay.
So those are pretty reasonable investments, and they yield a lot back. But yeah, it's so critical to understand what your budget is. When I was in college, I studied economics as my major, and there was a concept called effective demand. And it's a nice way of saying that you can want something, but unless you have the ability to pay for it, you don't have any actual demand for an item. This is a really critical one. We all want some things, but it's important to look at what you can afford and not to overspend. You don't ever want to put yourself in a bad financial position by investing in your home.
Sure.
And the other key to this is, as you're budgeting, budget on the high side. One of the biggest problems we see people run into on remodel projects is they say, man, I'm pretty sure, I know the national average for this is $10,000 to do this project, but I only got 8, and I think I can get it done for 8. Don't do that.
Right.
Figure out how to do it for 6, and if you get to the end and you have an extra $2,000, buy better plumbing fixtures.
Sure. Well, and then cutting corners, they're actually probably going to cost more in the end. If you're thinking, well, and you end up cutting a corner because of cost, it's going to bite you in the tail.
Absolutely. Or you hire a contractor and get them to give you a lower bid than what it may take to actually finish the project. And then they can't finish the project because they don't have the money.
Right.
We talked about that when we talked about hiring a contractor. It's a very common problem.
Sure.
Unfinished projects will affect the value of the home negatively in a significant way.
No one wants to finish a project.
There are people that will do it, but they want a significant discount for the trouble, and you will lose probably the entire value of what you've put into it and a little.
Sure. But then you run into other things, too, is the other person, if they're in mid-project, is that the project they want? You know what I mean? Okay, I'm redoing the kitchen, but you've already put the granite tops. I don't want granite. I want concrete, you know?
Absolutely.
So no one wants to tackle someone else's idea, basically. So.
Absolutely correct.
Again, like you said, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to come by or call or visit or go online. You can go to the Builders Do It Center Facebook page there. If you got questions, you can submit them there, and someone will address them and take care of them. And
Absolutely.
Put you in the right direction. So, and if you missed any of our other past, we've talked. I mean, everything from sprinklers to exterior paint to flooring to decks. I mean, we've covered it all. To how to pick a contractor. If you missed any of our previous ones, you can go the Builders Do It Center's YouTube page there. You just type in like Builders Do It Center Roswell on YouTube. And
YouTube.com/Builders Do It Center, or you can search Builders Do It Center on YouTube.
Very good.
Or you can go to our Facebook page.
Very good. And follow it all that way too. And if you want to do some scrolling, it's on our Phil's Facebook and actual page to the actual RoswellsTalkFM.com. Don't forget, tonight, Builders Do It Center tailgate party. We're going to be out at the Wool Bowl beginning at 5:30 p.m., getting you ready for homecoming matchup as the Goddard Rockets take on the Clovis Wildcats. We're going to start broadcasting at 5:30. We'll have the Goddard Band Boosters selling delicious giant Super Meat Mart hot dogs and Pepsis, just $2 for a Pepsi and a hot dog. You guys are going to set up the Jenga and the cornhole and all that good stuff, and hopefully the weather will not become an issue for us.
We will find out soon one way or the other. But either way, come out and have a nice warm hot dog with us.
Sure.
And I think we're going to have a pretty good time. We had a great turnout at the last Goddard game. And
Yeah.
I talked to the band boosters yesterday, and they are very optimistic that we'll be able to have even more people participate and come enjoy some pregame festivities with us.
Great. And bring a couple bucks, too, for the Sierra Fire Department. They're doing their Fill Their Boot campaign for muscular dystrophy, MDA. And so if you spend a couple bucks on a hot dog and a Pepsi for the band boosters and throw a couple bucks in the boot to help them out, that'd be awesome. And then come out, enjoy a game, and hopefully we're talking about a win. Goddard's due. They need a win.
Yes, they are.
In a couple weeks, they're due a win.
Go Rockets.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Justin. We'll see you tonight, all right?
Thanks, Mike.